basically, they're dying, right? There's opioids happening, and so there definitely needs to be attention there, but I do feel like at the same time we need to put equal attention, or at least a little bit more attention, on the babies too, because it's just an unknown right now. We don't know what sort of deficits there may encounter later in life, or if there will be or not. So I think we need to try to figure that out so that the field can be better informed.
NAS, or Neonatal Abstinence Syndrome, is the constellation of the signs and symptoms happen to the babies who are born to mother who have during the pregnancy either prescription opioid or illicit opioid or some other substance. That after the baby is born, what happens when the baby is in mother's womb, that when whatever the mother takes the medication, baby gets the medicine. But after the baby is born, or when the placenta is cut, after that baby is on her own and has her own. So when that medication effect wears off, they go through withdrawal, just like any opioid crisis or any opioid withdrawal that the person takes to extent that body gets habituated with opioid, and when they don't have opioid, the body goes through the craving phase where they just go through the withdrawal symptom. Same thing happens with the baby too. It happens after they are born, because now they are no longer getting the medication that the mothers were taking. So there are lots of issues with NAS, because what typically we do is we admit the babies or observe the babies after the baby is born when there is a history of maternal exposure of Subutex or any other drugs, either prescription or illicit. We wait for 5 days before we discharge them, because typically if withdrawal is going to happen, it's going to happen in first 5 days. So if you have the babies who is born normal or mother has no history of exposure to opioids, then baby go home in a day or two. So we start keeping the baby longer than normal. So A, there is an issue with the hospital, longer hospital stay, whether they develop or not. And B, if they develop the NAS or Neonatal Abstinence Syndrome, then more than likely they go on medications or they go on a non-pharmacological treatment and they end up staying for a very long period of time. So there is a lot of separation from a family. The issue that we don't know is which baby will go through withdrawal. Not all the mama who takes the medication, their baby go through withdrawal. So right now there's a lot of research happening to see which baby, if we can identify early, that go on a withdrawal, that we can pick it up early, so we don't have to keep all the babies for 5 days, and we can pick them early. So this starts from what we call irritable or crying, excessive crying, not able to sleep, having issue with the feeding, issue with the vomiting, issue with the high temperature, high pitched cry. Sometimes they go in a convulsion or seizures. They don't gain weight, they have a diarrhea, they have a vomiting, they cannot control their temperature, they have a hyperthermia, they have sometimes the abdominal issues, they have more perspiration, they have sneezing, they have excoriation. So there are lots of signs and symptoms that can happen to the babies who are born to the mothers who had used the opioid during pregnancy. 12 years back, we hardly used to see babies, 5 to 10 babies per year. Now we see 5 to 10 babies per week. So that is the problem. And I know right now it's been declared as opioid crisis, and we are losing a lot more, because unfortunately my biggest concern is we know that when the mother is pregnant, the brain is been developing, and when we give the morphine to the mom or morphine substitute to the mama or opioid, that developing brain gets exposed to the opioid, and which, like we know now, has some long-term side effects. So I am really concerned with what will happen if when they become an adult, because it's still new and not many adults who have as a childhood. So, and if you take it the social economic background and socio-economic issues that sometimes some group of this opioid disorder patients they go through, that makes it a lot more worse. So I'm really more concerned with the long-term effects, what it does to the society and to the individual in the long term.
Well, since babies can't really talk to us and tell us all the things, we kind of assume that the experience that they have is similar. And there is a way to kind of evaluate the newborn for withdrawal, and that's like a clinical type of evaluation where they're paying attention to things like duration of crying, and can you calm them, and can they eat, and things like that, and there's a score assigned to that. It's called the Finnegan score. And if baby has a certain number of kind of poor scores in this area, they're going to start treating them for withdrawal. They're going to assume that their symptoms are associated with that pain. And of course, you can measure babies like heart rate and things like that, but they can't communicate fully what they're experiencing. But the assumption is that the experience is the same because it's the same receptor, the same chemistry. It's so difficult to kick these addictions without any help. So those are all considered, call it mixed agonist antagonists. So they're going to give you some pain relief without the euphoria. So the experience is not as enjoyable as, say, taking oxycodone or hydrocodone, but the pain is managed. And so that's kind of the idea, is that, well, I'll never be able to go off these medications if I still have this pain. And so you can continue to manage the pain while hopefully providing other types of therapy like behavioral therapy, physical therapy to deal with the pain and the source of the pain. And then the idea is that you will titrate that down over time. So a successful medication-assisted therapy means that you're slowly decreasing your dose, and that doesn't have to happen quickly. It can happen over a period of years, but that's the philosophy behind that.
So basically, Suboxone, buprenorphine, and methadone. So before the Suboxone and the buprenorphine, which is also known as the Subutex, came in, they were using what we call a methadone, which is a long-acting morphine. So that was used in the late 90s and early 2000s. And there was a study came out which looked at the mother who were taking the methadone and the Subutex or buprenorphine, and what we call the mother study, which is a landmark study, that showed that when mother takes the Subutex or buprenorphine, the infant does not go through the withdrawal that bad, and does not require the treatment that long enough. So then a lot of people who are taking care of the mothers, they started using more of a buprenorphine or Subutex. So methadone is a long-acting morphine. Subutex or buprenorphine is a different form of the morphine, which has a different receptor of the morphine, and its half-life are different, and how the babies react after they're born, they are different. Versus Suboxone, so with the buprenorphine, there's always a risk of mother abusing herself. So the Suboxone is a mixture of a buprenorphine and also the antagonist Narcan. So they cannot abuse that medication. So Suboxone is a mixture of both. Narcan and morphine, so which is the antidote of morphine.
I think every place has their own issues. You know, California has its own issues. New York has its own issues. This just happens to be the issue in this area. I think some of it is financial. And the financial comes from, you know, education, lack of jobs. You know, some of it is, if you brought it outside of just East Tennessee and you go look into Southwest Virginia and some of the other areas where coal mining was a big job market, well, with all of the environmental controls being placed out there, the coal mining industry is decreasing, and as that decreases, that is causing a decrease in jobs in those areas. And when those areas lose jobs, you start having people that become depressed because they don't have the capability to take care of their families. They aren't able to make the money like they used to. They can't have the things that they want. And so when you start having people that get depressed, they try to find a way to medicate it. And there's such a big stigma with mental health that they can't, or they don't feel that they can search out the appropriate methods to get a treatment. And so they turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs, and so then that kind of just becomes a budding problem in a different way, which has led to the opiate crisis that we have.
Control is similar to what your body would normally mitigate with endorphins. There's also delta and kappa, and then there's a fourth one. Some references refer to it as OR4, opioid receptor number 4, or sigma, and it's the least characterized of the four. So there are some competing theories about it, about the drug interaction with the receptor, but using the endorphin, one of the endorphin molecules, as a kind of as a framework, as a model to show, well, it's definitely binding to the receptor. You're really looking at two very important and one kind of tertiary amino acids in the receptor that are associated with the binding. And so there's a collection of acidic amino acids that are called the anionic pockets, so they have negative charge. And then there are, all your opioids have some kind of positive charge on the structure, and so those will interact with each other. And then there's an area of the receptor called the T subsite, and that's got several tryptophan amino acids. And so you have a section of the molecules that bind to that, and then the most potent of the opioids will bind to a third site that's rich in phenylalanine amino acids. So it's all about just interacting with the molecule and the amino acids on the other side of that protein. A couple things happen when you have kind of a prolonged exposure to the opioids. Your body's going to make more of the proteins that they bind to, so you're going to make more of those receptors, and that means you have to keep taking more and more drug to fill the receptors. So you're going to upregulate the receptors, and then you're going to downregulate your endorphin production, because your body's like, well, we're getting plenty in, we don't need to make any ourselves. So early withdrawal is really just kind of a presentation of panic, some aggression, start to kind of get some of the opposite effects of that opioids present. So you'll have some increase in that respiratory rate, sweating, anxiety, sometimes nausea and vomiting that will go along with that. And that can be prolonged for several days after the last dose. And there's also quite a bit of pain, just generalized pain associated with that, because if you have a dependence on these drugs, your body is making smaller amounts of the endorphins. And so you don't have a natural way to mitigate pain. And so the experience itself is supposed to be very painful. first responders and police and things like that are equipped with that, but I wonder even equipping it in the schools and in all of our classrooms, like you just never know when something like that's going to occur. So, and if you can keep them alive long enough to get treatment, then you've saved somebody's son or daughter. You've saved somebody's person. So.
Could step it up as a community and of providers and everything is just being more open to mental health and trying to help these moms get the treatment that they need, whether it be prescribing the MATs and doing that alongside with some behavioral therapy, right? Instead of just pushing a drug, we can work on trying to help them get better through therapy.
Ooh, there's a couple of different ways that I think that you could start. One would be welfare reform. I think we have a lot of people that are living off the government that don't need to be, leaves them too much time on their hands, and when you got a bunch of people with a bunch of time on their hands, they do things that they shouldn't be doing. So that is one potential that you could do, is you could look at changing that up, making sure that if people are getting assistance from the government, that they do truly need it, that they are not doing drugs, because I'm sorry, if you have money to go and purchase drugs, you should not be getting money from the government. So I think there's that aspect. I think you also have to look at what we're doing with keeping our children safe.
I'm really more concerned with the long-term effects, what it does to the society and to the individual in the long term.